The year is 1983. You just hopped off your bike and ran for the front door as the streetlights came on. Your dad says, "Grab your coat, son. We're going to the video store." Watching blockbuster movies at home was not a normal occurrence in the 1970s. Television stations would broadcast over the air in your local area, and depending on whether you were an urban kid or a rural family, you may have access to 3 or 4 channels that would carry a variety of syndicated network shows, news, and local content. You had very little choice of what to watch. Whatever was on was what you were watching. The concept of a device that would let you choose what to watch was revolutionary. Home videos as an idea was very new, really only having emerged in the very late 1970s and only becoming affordable for the masses in the mid-1980s. Famous video rental chain Blockbuster opened its doors in 1985, and the prices of mass-market VCRs, the devices that played the video cassettes, was finally coming down to the place where an average middle-class family could afford one. The first VCRs in the late 1970s made by JVC initially were well over $1,000, which is something like $5,000 in today's money. For the first few years, the average family would rent a player for the weekend, along with a handful of tapes. Renting a VCR in 1985 would cost about $25 for the weekend, and most stores would have new release movies for $2 to $3, and you could often get older movies and kids' movies for $1 for the weekend. Trust me, being 7 years old on a Friday night and being able to pick 2 or 3 movies from a vast selection to watch over and over all weekend long was the greatest gift that 80s dad could give to you. Remember, in 1983, we had no Nintendo. The titular NES launched in 1985, but was not widely available in most homes until 1987. We had no smartphones, no iPads, probably no computer, and if we did, Dad didn't let us touch it. We played outside, got dirty, got bruised, but had very little to do in the house on a Friday night. TV stations catered mostly to our parents during the evening hours. Children's programming only happened Saturday mornings and weekdays before school. There had been other ways to bring pre-recorded content into your home before then. I remember my dad going to the library and checking out a projector and several 16mm films. Yes, film. A big metal reel with celluloid film wrapped around it that you passed through a bright light in the projector and it would give you an image on the wall. Most of the movies available at the library were either educational in nature or historical, like old Charlie Chaplin skits or Laurel and Hardy, The Three Stooges, or very old black and white movies. Depending on the film used and the projector, there may or may not have been audio. Many of these films were silent. Something that people often forget are the format wars that plagued physical media throughout its whole life. Companies would develop a format and the machinery to play it, hoping to get an edge on the competition. Unlike today, where Netflix is available on any device with a screen, from various brands of TVs to phones, tablets, and even game consoles, in the 1980s you would have to invest in a format, buy an expensive machine, and then you pretty much had to stick with that format. In the beginning we had Betamax, a format similar to VHS from Sony, and JVC's VHS. Betamax was slightly better quality than VHS, but was significantly more expensive for the end consumer. By the time that home video had really taken off in the mid-1980s, it was clear that the public had chosen VHS for the cheaper price, and it became the default system. Tapes for both formats were available in stores for a while and at rental shops, but just like we see DVD and Blu-ray diminishing supply at stores today, Betamax was slowly phased out. Eventually, all the major electronics manufacturers, even Sony, who created Betamax, began producing VCRs and trying to get a piece of the rapidly growing market. In the early days, from the end of the 1970s to about 1985, purchasing movies was expensive and scarce, a niche market for enthusiasts. Most families could only afford to rent once in a while, as the purchase price for a new VHS tape could easily be upwards of $80 to $100 for one 2-hour movie. People look back to 1982 and the first home video release of Star Wars on a CBS Fox VHS label as the turning point to bringing home video into the mainstream. Other formats came and went, with Laserdisc being the most noteworthy. Laserdisc was created in 1978 using the same technology as DVDs way before its time. The actual discs were huge, the size of a vinyl record at 12 inches across. They provided a drastically better image and sound quality, but because the price of the players and the discs was significantly higher, it was relegated to enthusiasts and the very wealthy. Unlike Betamax, which died fairly quickly, Laserdisc went on to stay in production, serving its niche audience for well over a decade until DVD came out and dominated in the late 90s. Around the same time that Blockbuster appeared on the scene in 1985, movie publishers began to lower the prices on VHS tapes, and a boom in production happened. Up to that point, they had only been putting newer movies on physical media, stuff that had finished its run in theaters the year before, and making select collections of older classic movies, 6 here, 50 there, but it wasn't until the mid-1980s that they started going deep into the back catalogs and releasing virtually everything that had been made up to that point. Disney was one of the companies that sought to capitalize from the new surge to own collections of movies. VHS were finally cheap enough that you could buy one on a whim. Disney started releasing movies from its back catalog of animated features early in the history of VHS, but by the late 80s they had formulated a plan to release groups of films for a limited time and then remove them from circulation and release a different batch. This was called the Disney Vault and was one of my first personal experiences with FOMO marketing. You would go to your local department store and there would be a shelf with dozens of copies of about 8 different movies and a sign that said buy it now before it goes back into the Disney Vault. If you grew up with Netflix and Disney Plus, having hundreds of movies at your fingertips, you would never understand the feeling of knowing that your favorite movie, maybe The Sword and the Stone or Robin Hood, would never be able to be bought again after a limited time. Remember, we had no other way to see our favorite movies after they left movie theaters. You might watch it once or twice in a theater and then wait 1 to 2 years for a home video release. Disney creating this FOMO marketing was genius because it literally put people with kids over a barrel. Buy it now or never see it again. From almost the beginning of the VHS era, companies tried to create direct-to-home marketing. Notably, in 1982, mega music distributor Columbia House bought CBS Video Club and began marketing VHS by mail. In the 80s, every kid would try to convince their parents to sign up to get a few free movies. The scheme was to get in the door with a couple of freebies and then offer a monthly subscription, with the first 6 or so movies being heavily discounted and the rest of the 1 to 2 year commitment being fairly average prices. The ubiquitous Columbia House marketing was a staple of American and Canadian kitchen tables all through the 80s and 90s, and really up to the early 2010s, with the rise of streaming services killing the market for physical distribution. If you were a kid during this time, it cannot be overstated how much we wanted to subscribe. We begged our parents because we wanted the ability to watch our favorite movies whenever we wanted. What a cruel world we lived in, where we had to return those movies to the rental store and may not see them again for months or years. I'm just kidding, it was wonderful back then. Columbia House represented the utopia we have today, where everything we could want is a click of the remote away. The idea that we could have dozens of movies, even a curated collection of the stuff we loved most, was unfathomable at the time, and sadly, kids today do not value media the same way, I think, because they did not have to work for it. I remember renting The Little Mermaid and All Dogs Go to Heaven and watching them back to back probably 6 times each in one weekend, because I loved them so much and I knew I would lose access to them Sunday night. The Columbia House model spawned other services such as the Disney Movie Club, which was the same kind of service offering Disney and Disney-owned movies only. Disney VHS had a selling power you could not imagine in today's market. Like other viral trends, movies like the Beanie Babies, Disney had created the FOMO environment where millions of families rushed out to buy all the limited time releases in the late 80s and through the 90s. I remember being so proud of my collection as it was in the early 90s. It would have been a dream come true just a few years before. VHS lasted as a medium far longer than you might expect. From the late 1970s to the middle 2000s, nearly 30 years, which is astonishing. DVD came to replace VHS in the late 1990s, with many pointing to the DVD release of The Matrix in 1999 as a turning point in the adoption of DVD players. The Matrix was a visually stunning movie, and DVD was selling itself on the visual fidelity it was able to produce. Sony's PlayStation 2, which released in March of the year 2000, was also pivotal in bringing DVD to the format, having DVD playback included in the console. It went on to become the best-selling home video console of all time, a title it still holds to this day, largely because it was also many families' first DVD player at a price they could afford. The fact that TVs remained unchanged at this time slowed the transition from VHS though. CRT or tube TVs were not HD or really even capable of harnessing the full power of a DVD. It wasn't until about 2005 that many families were beginning to switch to flat-screen TVs, and the shortcomings of VHS became more apparent. The last official mass-market release of a VHS was in 2006, David Cronenberg's A History of Violence, but VHS would continue to be marketed and sold on store shelves and available for rental for a few years after that. It can't be overstated how important VHS was to the development of a home video market. Was it the best format? No. Betamax was better and failed. Laserdisc was better and never caught on with the mass market due to price. VHS was the choice of the masses, not only a way to watch your favorite movies, but also a way to record your favorite content from the TV and record all your family's memories with a camcorder. It was a do-everything format that people loved and adopted en masse. We didn't talk much about recording from TV, but before streaming services and on-demand content, before TiVo and DVR cable boxes, you would actually have to plan your day around watching your favorite show. If you went out for dinner with the family, you'd miss your show, and it was just gone. VCRs allowed you to record things to watch later, which was revolutionary for viewers. People recorded sports events, news coverage of major things like 9/11, and whole blocks of TV shows with commercials included, which is responsible for 99% of the content of this kind on YouTube. If you ever watched 80s toy commercials, or clips of the Olympics, or college football, chances are they were recorded at home on someone's VCR. The ability to use a camcorder to record directly onto VHS, which you could then immediately play in your VCR, was also revolutionary, allowing for a boom in small-scale video production of everything from weddings to local community events and sporting events. Businesses would provide workshops on VHS that could be played back infinitely, reducing the man-hours for training. My father had a small video production business in the 90s, and some of my fondest memories were traveling with him to record demolition derbies and motocross events around the area that we lived. We would do some rudimentary editing and then sell the tapes to the public and the competitors, and they could watch themselves for the first time. We take modern technology for granted. The phone in my pocket and this iPad I'm writing the script on run this entire YouTube channel. I can search the web, use AI, play music and videos, do complex editing, create animations, all at the touch of a button. But people forget it was only 15 or 20 years ago that we had none of this. None. The first iPhone was released in 2007, and it wasn't really until the iPhone 3 that you could really recognize it as what we call a smartphone today. The world has changed so much since 2010 that it is hard to remember where we came from. But putting a videotape in a VCR and watching a movie in that way still brings me back to simpler times, and I can find joy in the poor quality and lack of modern features. VHS will forever be the most important step towards the future we now live in, and I will forever remember it with fondness. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.